What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to episode 10 of Politically Conscious. So I've been doing this podcast game for a little while, so you're not official till you 10 in. So today is our first official. We really doing this thing politically conscious. I got my man Emil Bryant, which y'all should know him. He's held me down for all 10 shows. We got our brother Leo Smith jumping in this thing with us. Both amazing political consultants. I'll let both of them introduce themselves. I am your mental activist, moderator for this political show. Both of these brothers know way more than I do about politics, but I am a long-time podcaster, as I mentioned, with Mental Dialogue. I specialize in hard conversations on race, sex, and culture, and now bringing those talents over to the political realm, where I always say people don't have conversations; they just yell at each other. And so we try to change politically conscious to a situation where we are having real dialogue about politics. So Emil, again, you've been holding me down, brother. If you will, introduce yourself, and then we'll introduce Leo and get started on today's topic.
I am Emil Bryant, political consultant. I do many things, business consulting as well, management consulting. I am an Air Force veteran and a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, and I have helped with congressional campaigns. I've advised senatorial candidates as well as local and state candidates in how to think about talking to, reacting to, and working with ordinary folks. So my perspective is always going to be that of, how does this affect the person on the street?
I love it. Leo, quick political background. You have a long one. Well, you give us the short version and we'll get started on this morning.
I'll give you the short version. Basically, I'm a bridge maker for politics and business. I am doing government relations work previously with the Republican National Committee as a strategist, up and leading up into the Trump election. And currently focuses on mostly advocacy for major institutions and political government relations clients.
I love it. Well, let's go ahead and not keep the people waiting, if you will. And so what we do is we actually look at various political clips around that are happening currently at current times and just kind of give a politically conscious focus on them. Basically, what we tell you is in the media, quite often there's a slant based on, if you will, that media's background, based on who they typically support. And so even when they're covering a story, legitimately, if you will, there's still typically that slant. And so our goal is to look at those same clips and give our personal opinions, if you will, but just know they're not coming with an agenda for how you should think. We just kind of give our thoughts to it, and hopefully the audience, y'all can pick up and give your thoughts. And again, we don't care what side you're on of these things, if you will. And so about over a week ago, there was a big, I still call it Twitter, but I guess it's called X now. There was a big back and forth, if you will, between Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, and the MAGA supporters, if you will, about immigration, which obviously is always a big hot button topic when it comes to our elections, if you will. And so I just wanted to go ahead and give some context of exactly what happened. I saw Joy Reid give a pretty cool wrap up of what happened with that. So I'm going to share a cut from her, just a short cut, and then I'll get both of your takes on what she's saying. But I think this just gives good context of exactly what happened for someone who may have been, if you will, under a rock and didn't hear about the big blow up on X, if you will. So let's play this cut.
Okay, this is fascinating. There is a full-on Twitter fight breaking out right now over Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy going all in and making H-1B visas their hill to die on. And I don't know who started it, but it's getting ugly. So Vivek Ramaswamy is getting hosed. He's getting cooked for this tweet. The reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native Americans. He puts that in scare quotes because Native Americans are actually indigenous people. That's not what he meant. He meant people born in the United States. Isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth in all caps. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s, and likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. So what he's saying is that Americans, namely the kinds of Americans who vote his way, I guess, or at least including them, ain't qualified for the kinds of jobs that they're hiring for in Silicon Valley. Top tech companies, he's saying, have to look elsewhere in other countries like India, Pakistan, other places. His family originally came here from India, and they have to look to them because they've got the right culture that makes them qualified for the jobs. Oh, that didn't go over well with the MAGA folks. And then it got even spicier. Elon Musk himself jumped in when people started saying, no, Vivek, that ain't cool. So somebody posts, there are over 330 million people in America. Surely there must be enough among them to build your ultimate team. Why would you deny real Americans that opportunity by bringing foreigners here? Elon Musk's response, your understanding of the situation is upside down and backwards. Of course, my companies and I would prefer to hire Americans, and we do, as that is much easier than going through the incredibly painful and slow work visa process. However, in all caps, there is a dire shortage of extremely talented and motivated engineers in America. This is not about handing out opportunities from some magical hat. You don't get it. This is blindingly obvious when looking at NBA teams. Oh, now he's going to do the race science. As the physical differences are so obvious to see, however, the mental differences between humans are far bigger than the physical differences. So he goes straight race science and says, just like NBA teams got all those black people on it because they just are physically better at basketball, I guess. He's going race science. He's like, the mental differences between Americans and H-1B visa foreign workers are just quantum difference. Now, we shall note, Elon Musk is a foreign-born immigrant, too. Vivek Ramaswamy's parents came here from India, and his dad is not a citizen. He's still a citizen of India. So Vivek is a first-generation American. Elon Musk is an immigrant who's a naturalized citizen who, when he first got here, according to his brother, they were both undocumented. But they're saying that they had the innate qualities, not just to work in Silicon Valley, but to hire. They're both like tech guys, right? So they've got the qualifications, but y'all regular Americans don't.
Emil, jump in, brother.
Boy, so she was doing okay until that last bit, and I'm just gonna call her straight out. And Joy, I love you, appreciate what you try to do, but you equated race science to this argument, and that was not, well, that was just pure propaganda. And I'm just gonna call it out because that's what it was, pure propaganda. The thing that Vivek Ramaswamy said that I totally agree with is that it is about culture, but it's not about culture like, oh, India is smarter or India has a better, harder work culture. He said the words out loud, we value mediocrity over excellence. The meritocracy in America has been dead for far longer than a couple of decades, since the 90s. It's been dead since right around the Civil War. It just didn't look like it until later. Right? You have to kind of go back through history to understand Vivek Ramaswamy's argument about mediocrity over excellence. But the bottom line is the good old boy culture has created a subculture within America that values connections and quote unquote loyalty over actual merit, actual accomplishment, actual excellence. And that is determining a lot of the problems you see on Wall Street today. You have people who are getting MBAs that do not have the proper qualifications to get into Harvard, to get into Yale, to get into Kellogg Business School, yet they're there. And why is that? Because their parents were legacies, and that's bringing mediocrity to the surface. It's another form of affirmative action, if you ask me. On the other side of the argument, when she was talking about Elon Musk is 100% right. It is difficult to hire H-1B visa workers. Very, very difficult. And there are plenty of Americans if you know where to find them. North Carolina A&T State University is the top producer of Black engineers in America. Is he combing that school for its talent? Is he combing all of the other Black schools like FAMU, like some of the other traditionally hardcore engineering Black schools? And that's not to mention Hispanic serving institutions and other institutions outside of the top tier institutions that actually have diamond talent. So yes, it is difficult to hire H-1B visas, but it is probably just as difficult, or maybe even a shade less difficult, to go find diamonds in the mines all across America if you're willing to look. And her argument about race science trumped the argument I'm about to make, which is that the diamonds exist in America, but you gotta go find them because they're not gonna come to you. And it's easier to go find hardworking people you can control with an H-1B visa who will work 60 or 70 hours a week and not complain because their ticket to America is that job, that it is to go find somebody from Kentucky or Illinois or California who would be less likely to work those long hours for little pay because you can't control them as easily. That's my opinion, and that's what I'm going to talk about.
I respect it. I'm gonna throw it over to Leo. One thing I will say, and for me, it's not even about. I don't think I didn't hear her go race science. She was highlighting Elon's using the basketball thing that he went race science. Just that's the clarity I heard in that piece. He was saying that him referencing basketball.
I understand
players,
why she said it. I just don't agree that that was the right parallel.
That's exactly what Elon was using, though, Emil.
No, he used the NBA. Science. Her introduction of race science as a topic because of the NBA. The NBA is a selective group of people. Why is it selective? It is
Emil. I'm gonna go ahead and move it to Leo. I was saying she said Elon used it. He did.
Well, I'll pick up on that. I'll pick up on it.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
All right. So I would say that Elon wasn't using race science. He's using science. And the science that he's using is what Emil's talking about. When you're looking for the best of the best, you get into subsections of subsets. And when you're looking at people who have found, let's say, industry is only open to me in comedy. I won't name the people. And the people find out that if I'm oppressed, but yet I have access to the places of social mobility, the clubs, the country clubs, etc. If I have access to them, and one of the ways that I can escape my oppression is by entertaining them, then you might find an abundance of my type in comedy. I won't say, for instance, there's a lot of Jews in comedy. Why not? Because it was a way of adapting to the society. Black people in sports, for a long time, it was the only thing we could do. So it is natural that when people are seeking survival, that they find the paths available to them, most available to them. And because of intergenerational transfer, because of, skill transfer, knowledge transfer, they may start to dominate in a certain field. The ivory towers of intelligence and technology were not abundantly available to us. Oh, gee, I wonder why we're not heavily present in those fields. So Alexis de Tocqueville, provides sort of a framework of this all the way back to the 1800s. Americans have a way of lowering all the standards to the least common denominator. But why? And the reason why is because America has operated with the system of those who are controlling the narrative and the resources, and those who don't. Poor white people and enslaved Black people. And, as the start of the industrialization and development of a nation. And in order to justify that and make sense of that, America continues to play this dupe thing about, what's really going on. And so, one of the reasons poverty breeds hunger. Hunger breeds what? Compliance. It also breeds innovation. Poverty teaches. And so, yes, do Black Americans today have it better than most Indians in India? Heck yeah, we do. But they have a hunger and an available of education and a desire for a certain of education that helps them move towards survival. The fact is that part of our movement towards mediocrity It's because we bought this egalitarian myth, this myth that we should not strive to be better than others. We should not strive to be competitive. We should not, as Black people, seek to just grab things for ourselves first and develop our own technologies and then withhold them and leverage them in order to have power over people. It has not been our mentality to do that as descendants of American slavery. And that is because we bought into the little trick that the elites tell us, hey, don't be so competitive. You guys should share. You're the moral fabric of America. You always yield. You always bend over. So that is why one reason why Black people remain uncompetitive and feels we ought to be competitive is we've gotten tricked into a comfort that is just all mythology. Now, so Elon and Vivek both are sort of like rationalizing. I love how Vivek says is lazy to just say this or that. Well, it's lazy to not even go even further and just say adaptation, a strict libertarian idea, Darwinism, is a real thing in effect. There's nobody, blacks, whites, yellow, brown, nobody has a specific genetic advantage for either physical or definitely not intellectual. In fact, the intellectual chasm is much smaller than the physical chasm because a lot of the physical chasm is because of environmental circumstances
exactly.
And what kind
of. So
let
me interrupt 1 second.
So, let you go. There you go.
So I'm gonna interrupt 1 second, and I'll challenge y'all to watch the clip again. Elon has said exactly the opposite of what you just said. So I'm still standing on. He highlighted. He said the intelligent differences are much bigger than physical differences.
He did. He said I disagree with Elon on that.
So I'm just highlighting.
That's his laziness. And let me say this too, Brother Smith. Elon has to say that. Elon is a descendant of the apartheid system. The money and wealth that he came here with is because his father and his grandfather abused South Africans. And he believes in that system. Absolutely. So of course he's going to rationalize that kind of stuff.
And so all I'm pointing out to you guys, we on Politically Conscious, we're always going to call a thing a thing. And so it was incorrect to suggest that she wasn't calling out the race science that Elon was using. So I'm just correcting calling a thing a thing. He absolutely used race science in his statement. And I just want to get that clarity. Let's go to another cut, if you will. This is from our brother Shelley, if you will, cut that he used on his show this week.
So I normally air Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. And for those of you who may not know, I'm on the right, and I'm a Trump supporter, right? And so I have supported this administration, new administration that got elected in November. I've supported the transition and everything, and I'm looking forward to 2025. I'm looking forward to this next 4 years. I'm looking forward to the good, hopefully, that will come. And I believe confidently that it will, because I supported them, right? So there's a huge, large part of me that wants to be right about that support, and so I want them to do well. I want Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump, to do well. Well, there's some controversy coming out from yesterday. I'm going to read to you what Vivek Ramaswamy, whom I like. When he was running for president, I liked him. I had a chance to meet him. He was on my show. I like the guy. I like the way he thinks. I like the way he thinks as a conservative. So he posted on X this. Here's what he said. The reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over quote-unquote Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit. In parentheses, he says a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. A key part, our American culture has venerated, here's the key word, mediocrity over excellence for way too long. And in parentheses, he has at least since the 90s and likely longer. Well, here's the blowback. Now, left Twitter followers, leftist tweeters or whatever, went after this statement, and they were outraged. But they were more outraged because Vivek and Elon liked it. Elon, pushed it, right? He put a check mark kind of thing to it. And so the left was mad at what he wrote because they hate Vivek and Elon, right? That was part of their Vivek Ramaswamy could have tweeted out Merry Christmas to everybody, and someone on the left would have said, well, it's Happy Holidays, right? So that's that. So take them off the table for a second. But the right, oh my God, the right was inflamed. Nikki Haley, there's nothing wrong with American workers or American culture. All you have to do is look at the border and see how many want what we have. That was Nikki Haley. She was one of the calmer ones. Some guy, John Cadillo, said the level of arrogance in this post is quite something. Michael Flynn Jr. said totally backward and utterly appalling. And it went on and on and on from people on the right. And as I saw that, I said to myself, wow, this is fascinating. So here's my message in defense of Vivek Ramaswamy's tweet. And here's my message to all my conservative friends who may be outraged at what he said. The fact of the matter is, you all, myself included, voted to get rid of the Department of Education. Therefore, you don't get to scream now that education in this country is so great that we're not mediocre, because you voted to get rid of the Department of Education. You see what I learned in this simple tweet of Vivek and the responses from the right to his tweet? What I learned is it's okay for my friends on the right to call Hispanics mediocre or African Americans mediocre. It's okay for my friends on the right to scream, you're a DEI hire. But when someone tells you how mediocre you have been, oh my God, it's sudden outrage. You see, it's easy to call black culture mediocre or loser or deficient. It's easy to call Hispanic immigrants mediocre, devoid, or deficient, or that culture deficient. It's easy to exclaim how great American culture is until you run for office and you say, we need to get rid of this, this, and that, because American culture is suffering. If you're MAGA, which means make America great again, and you say we need to make America great again, then by definition, you are admitting that America is mediocre, because we need to make it great again. Again being the operative word.
Leo, jump in, brother.
Hey, look, Brother Shelley was putting it down right there. Sometimes I wonder about, going back to a Joy Reid. Joy Reid, I don't even take her seriously. I mean, I don't, because she's just, even when she's right, she's only right once in a while. And it's just for, it's kind of blaringly obvious. And she's always yielding to the little bubble that she lives in. Shelley goes in and out of, entertaining the far right kind of bubble to sometimes being a seriously social critiquing brother, who's just calling it like it is. That was one of his good moments in my mind. And he's going to get some pushback from some white right-leaning folks who are going to say, how dare you call out the ironies and the disconnected arguments that we have. We only criticize, black people and brown people. We never criticize ourselves. You're supposed to be with that game. Like Tupac saying, if I write bad stuff about white people, they're not going to buy my music. Shelley, you better watch out.
Shelley throwing elbows. I'm not going to lie. And I appreciate it, because the hypocrisy is evident. You can't blame people. You can't undermine an education system for 50 bloody years and then expect that education system to pop out engineers at the rate it used to during the space race, right? So look at America from 1960 to 1969. You just take a look and see that children down to the grade school level were aspiring to be chemists, physicists, rocket scientists, engineers. They wanted to participate in this thing called the space race. President Kennedy galvanized the nation. Black kids, Asian kids, white kids, all wanted to try to participate in this thing called the space race. Come the 70s, Vietnam puts a lot of cold water on all of that fire for innovation and creativity. We run out of money because of the Vietnam War. Come the 80s, we start to see the greedy generation, sort of the me generation pop out. And people are looking at conspicuous consumption is what they called it, right? So when you look at this trend over the last 60 years or so, you see there's a denigration of the value of education from what the space race said was important to the me generation in the 80s and beyond. So now let's talk about what happened in that time frame to public education. Public education in the early 60s was primarily free. It was also highly competitive. You didn't just get into college, you had to compete for college, but there were lots of what we call blue collar work to keep you solvent if you didn't get that position in school. Lots of technical high schools and regular high schools had lots of technical classes. Come later, we get to the me generation, public education is denigrated. College is now, the cost of college actually exceeds the cost of the price of or rise in inflation. You see that colleges are less exclusive because they see money to be made in the process of bringing in more students. The government is trying to fund more educations to accommodate the shift from an industrial economy to an information economy. And all of that's happening. Meanwhile, you have one group of people who are directly undermining public education, and you have another group of people who are sidetracking public education from the 3 R's to some other stuff that might be useful in society, but aren't going to make people competitive in the workforce. This context goes from the late 60s all the way to today, where you're just now remembering, oh, the 3 R's are important. So when you undermine education the way it was done by both the left and the right, for different reasons and for different motivations, but you still see that denigration happening, you also understand that this nation does not produce nearly the proportion of educated, highly competitive workers that other nations like India and China are producing on a regular basis today.
You know, one of the things that I always have to acknowledge to my friends who are, you know, second and third generation immigrants here, who don't quite understand American history and sometimes, you know, argue advantages or superiority in certain fields, is that if you grew up in India, if you're in China, there is no race-based construct historically that's keeping you out of education. There might be class-based ones, but not race-based. Black Americans, when they come over here and go, why are Black Americans taking more advantage of these engineering jobs? Because we actually had a race-based stoppage from us being able to compete. So America has made itself less competitive through its Jim Crow and racial policies. If we had allowed more of the Americans a competitive education and full access into the Ivy Tower and science schools, then we wouldn't really need to recruit people from other nations as much.
No, not at all. And that's the beauty of what Shelley did. I'm going to play another cut here real quick. But that's the beauty of what Shelley talked about in his piece, if you will. I went under his piece because he posted it on his page, and I highlighted and I says, and the biggest thing out of all of this is all of this terminology of not recognizing this, of getting rid of DEI is what you're talking about, Leo. It gets rid of the diversity that actually makes us better. So the terminology behind getting rid of DEI actually is going to continue to make us mediocre because you're not taking advantage of the best of all groups. Go ahead, Leo, and I'll play.
Hopefully not. So here's the problem with DEI. DEI became something other than restorative. So I think getting rid of DEI is only wrong if you throw the baby out with the bathwater, meaning we've got to get people like Vivek and Elon to either understand or to move their signal, their noise rather, into out of the way so we can get a stronger signal. Where we got lazy with DEI is we made it about everything and all things. We made it about like lowering the bar, accepting anything. That's not the kind of thing that our forefathers argued for, meaning our African-American civil rights leaders' forefathers. They didn't argue that we should be less than and then allowed to come in at a less than great standard, or to lower the bar about what is acceptable when it comes to performance, innovation, creativity, etc. But that's what DEI has lately argued for the past 20 years. And so in that way, it's good that DEI is gone because we didn't argue for the functional aspect of diversity. That's what we need to renew our argument for.
So I'm gonna tell you this real quick. They will factually DEI has not played out in the way that you just suggested, Leo. Now, what happened was, let's just go a real quick history. In the 70s, when they find out the government's actually going to put some teeth behind some equal protection when it comes to affirmative action, right? When they find that, we start getting the court cases. So once the company saw, oh, the government is actually going to take us to court for this, some of the companies themselves chose to put in quotas. This is where you get the lowering of the standard, but they only did it just because they didn't want government interference. So when that was the choice, that's the period in which we've now kept a narrative that lowering the standard is part of DEI. Right. It actually did go through that period in the 70s and 80s in which that was actually done. So I'll give you that fact. But there is no on record. If you go into the legality of how DEI has been used since quotas was disavowed, that lowering of the standard does not exist. Like it was played around with when the brother, not the brother, but the guy over at American Airlines that says, hey, I'm going to use DEI to get more women and blacks or whatever. And so people start saying, oh, I don't want black pilots or I don't want women pilots, as if the FDA was ever going to lower its standard to allow somebody to fly. Like there is no evidence of a standard being lowered. The narrative precedes the actual facts. So when DEI is used like it's been used for the last 20 years, how it's been used factually, there has been no lowering of the standard. Agreed. That is a fact.
Agreed.
All right, let's go to this next cut.
The fight that they are having on the right now about immigration and clarifying the fact that they're not actually all on the same page about what kind of immigration and what kind of immigrants they have been talking about is there's a conceit here. We need immigrants in this country. We do. Yeah. We need immigrants in this country because we have an aging population that needs care. We need immigrants in this country because we have a labor force that relies on their labor. I would say America is simply better with immigrants. I know that is not a universally agreed upon position, but part of what they're reckoning with here is the fact that there are skills that these immigrants bring. And yeah, there are high skilled workers that come under H-1B, but all of these immigrants who are coming, you come and you work in ag, that's a skill. You come and you work in construction, that is a skill. And we have to value those skills and that labor in this country. We need to be honest about the fact that it's not just immigrants coming to this country. It is businesses and industries in this country that are saying, please come because we need you here too. And so if you want to go after the immigrant, you want to go after the person who comes to this country seeking refuge, seeking security, then you also need to talk about the businesses that are luring them over. You can't have it one way and not the other. And so to me, they are finally telling on themselves.
I played this cut because this is the reality of immigration, despite what the politics on either side of the term immigration and how it is used at election time. It is both sides are typically full of narratives, whereas that cut, in my opinion, is the reality of what immigration has always been. And as we obviously use the Vivek and the Elon X battle with MAGA as the kickoff of this conversation, that cut also puts in the context of the reality of the agriculture workers who are 50% of our current workers. And so I don't think politically we've ever had the immigration conversation in a realistic way, because politics obviously plays on all of our emotions, if you will. But I think that cut is the reality. Emil, I'll let you start your thoughts on what you just saw.
So I agree with her 100%. In fact, if you look at E-Verify and all of the enforcement actions that the federal government takes against companies that are hiring illegal workers, you will find a paucity of enforcement actions. I'm going to use that word paucity, right? You will find very few enforcement actions against people hiring illegal workers. The E-Verify system is not mandated federally across the country. That E-Verify system is not being used properly. It is easy, far too easy to get a taxpayer identification number that although linked to not working, is actually used by people who should not be working legally. So you get this problem that either employers are not asking for taxpayer identification numbers, or they're ignoring the data that comes with those, or they're not using the E-Verify system at all. And they're not being fined because the federal government tacitly recognizes that these agricultural workers specifically, but not exclusively, must be here. And the other problem, and I'm going to introduce a whole new X factor in all this, is that automation needs to happen more. In fact, one of the biggest control mechanisms for poor people is work. And automation would solve a lot of these problems, but we're not automating these lower skilled jobs that could be automated. There are people with innovations that could shake trees to bring oranges down that are ripe. There are innovations, just like Eli Whitney created the cotton gin to reduce the amount of labor 150 years ago, almost 200 years ago now. That innovation could have, if you looked at technology in a linear fashion, reduce the need for agricultural workers today. But we don't talk about automation as a function of agricultural work because we're using low-skilled labor as a control mechanism for poor people. And that process is exacerbated by bringing people over that you don't have to record their taxpayer identifications numbers properly. You don't have to pay them properly. And then if you look at some of the housing situations and some of the human relations situations that are created by this, all of that is atrocious, and all of that is tolerated because we have chosen to let employers dictate how illegal workers are used in this country, and that's to all of our detriment across the board.
Leo?
You know, I love what Emil picked up on off of the clip, because that's where me, as somebody who works in helping legislators who are often elected because of charisma and who they know and maybe money, actually come up with good policy. Because what the journalist spoke of, for instance, she brought up one issue. Emil addressed the issues of technology and how that can assist in lessening the need to be so thirsty for immigration when it comes to workers, which puts you in a jeopardized situation anytime you're thirsty for anything in life. So policy-wise, the nation does not need to have that thirst. Like, we understand we don't want to depend on other countries for oil, so we also shouldn't depend on other nations for employees, because that weakens us. So that's a real thing. I'm a nationalist when it comes to America because I'm an American. So let's be clear on that. But she brought up some other things that begs for solutions that I think we need to talk about more. For instance, if we valued agriculture as work in a way that we ought to and we need to teach, then there might be more people interested in the field. You know, I still have the dream of being the farmer in his air-conditioned, $100,000 combine with my suit on, dealing with my poppies and my cannabis or whatever. So we value it and we put a price on it that helps more Americans enter the field. That's one thing culturally we need to shift to. Black people used to be really into farming. We're not anymore now. Everybody's going, what's happening with our food? Everybody's food insecure now. Boy, would it be great if we really control food. And when it comes to, so you see where I'm going. And then the home health care thing. Again, I've got a friend that, I'm 60 now. So I have a lot of friends who have aging parents who need nursing care, medical care in their homes 24/7. I've got friends that pay some of these folks, a lot of them immigrants, $70,000, $100,000 a year. Now, if the government says we value aged populations and we can figure out a way to make sure that there's fair compensation for home health workers, there's another way we don't need immigrants. Because I know there'd be a lot of people of all races and colors who would take the job if the conditions were at least somewhat regulated, maybe, but at least packaged in a way that made it make sense for folks. We can do that.
Now, I love this conversation. Again, that's why we're politically conscious. None of what you're hearing is rhetoric on one side or the other. We're just talking about this in a very real way. Now, something that I've always highlighted, and I want to also add in addition to that clip, is something that I've been calling for on the Mental Dialogue talk show quite often, is literally the concept of, as Vivek kicked off this Twitter war, if you will, as he kicked it off, I've been calling for at least when I've been on that show, I've been doing this show for 8 years and almost 9 years. But from the very beginning, I've highlighted similar to how, for example, some of those Indians say, hey, I want to try to get one of those H-1B, H-1B visas. And they actually often will bring their family over after they've successfully secured a job. I've highlighted that because there is a lack of Americans who can fill those positions, I've argued that as African Americans, we should make STEM, particularly in those areas of need, our new NFL, our new NBA. I always talk about there's 4,000 professional sport athletes, but in Georgia over the next decade, they're going to need 80,000 people to fill those STEM jobs that some going to be filled by H-1Bs, right?
Yep.
We could actually go to the FAMUs like you talked about earlier. Like we can literally make it a focus, just like those immigrants who make it a focus to get to America to now bring over poor family members because they've had success by getting those high paying tech jobs. We could actually focus on them as a community as well. Go ahead, Emil. I just wanted to.
If we're trying to secure the bag as a community, then, entertainment is a form of lottery. Let's be very clear that, 1 out of every 5,000 male basketball or football players goes to the professional leagues. 1 out of every 5,000. That's a lottery, in my opinion. But, it's not a lottery if you're trying to work for Boeing or Tesla. I can put you in the 70 to 80% chance of getting hired by Tesla or Boeing or a Fortune 500 and make a decent, not just 6-figure income, but a decent 6-figure income, i.e. 120 plus in about 3 years after graduation with the kind of skills that we can impart. But nobody want to hear me talk about that because I'm going to ask you to do some hard stuff, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering. I'm going to ask you to do some hard stuff that requires a base that comes from high school or middle school that a lot of people aren't willing to invest the time in. So here's your point. How many hours does it take to produce a professional athlete? And if we figure out that number, and then we say you're investing this many hours to achieve a 1 in 5,000 opportunity. If you take that same number of hours and I give you an 8 in 10 chance to score a healthy 6-figure income, which would you prefer? The 1 in 5,000 chance of getting $1 million contract, or the 8 in 10 chance of getting a $250,000 job or scoring $1 million career earnings over lifetime, multiple $1 million earnings over a lifetime. Most people,
and quite often, and I'm gonna jump in over here real quick. And quite often, engineers and those in those tech jobs make more money than the average professional athlete, since you're talking about a 3.5 year average career for an NFL athlete, for example. And so over time, a 30, 40-year career in this area, actually, you will see they end up with more money than the typical athlete.
Every athlete has to do something after athletics, has to do something after sport. And most of them do not have a skill that they can go to. I would prefer to see our finest minds and bodies use professional athletics as their plan B. But that's just me.
I respect it. Leo, I know you had to jump off camera. Are you still with us audio-wise? Any thoughts on what you
I'm
just
still
heard?
on audio, but what I'm going to do, maybe when you're doing your next clip or whatever, I'm going to switch over to audio only. So I'm going to leave and come back. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and throw this next clip out. Just wanted to bring some lightheartedness into this deep conversation, if you will. And so I thought this clip right here is appropriate for today's conversation. I don't know the name of this comedian. I wish I did to give him credit, but I found this on IG, and so we'll play it, and hopefully Leo can catch some of it as well.
MAGA. MAGA. Make America great again. They have a point. America is not doing so great right now. Right? Our kids' math scores are down. Our children's science scores are down. When judged according to international metrics, healthcare system's not doing so great. Wealth gap disparities increasing exponentially. There was an implied promise to a generation of Americans that if you do certain things, work hard, go to college, be a good person, you would have certain outcomes, and those outcomes didn't materialize for majority of people because baby boomers entrenched in decision-making positions lowered the capital gains tax so that their net worth essentially compounds year after year. And post-World War II, U.S. leadership traded the domestic manufacturing industry for national security by making the U.S. dollar the default international trade currency, which gave America the ability to impose economic sanctions on foreign countries through a U.S. financial banking system, but consequently increased the value of the U.S. dollar astronomically, which made it impossible for anyone to manufacture anything in America. Although the logic at the time was that Americans were supposed to upskill en masse away from the menial manufacturing jobs, but everyone here's too much of a dumbass to stay in school, so we just traded domestic manufacturing to Asia and the rest of the world at the expense of working class families. But if you don't read enough, it comes out as, let's go, Brandon! And it's like you have a point, but you don't have the vocabulary to describe your reality because you didn't read enough. You gotta keep reading. Beyond the hashtag, there's a book behind the word. You gotta keep going. You can go at your own pace, but you gotta finish the required reading, otherwise we can't have a conversation. It's just, we're all catching up to each other. Very, very passionate people, my MAGA friends. And I respect their passion to some extent. I do. They're like, man, Ronnie, I love America. I would die for this country. And I believe them. I believe they love America. And I believe they would die for this country, which is very admirable. But it's like, man, you're willing to die for your country. Why aren't you willing to learn math? Also for your country. Like do both and for your country. Because I know you want to die for your country, but we're losing the engineering jobs to Asia right now. So we need less people to die for the country. You need more people to do their homework for the country. Like do your homework for your country. Like actually sit down and show the working and like do that's a more efficient way to show your patriotism. Like if you take that I want to die energy and you put it into homework, you will fucking top the school. I'm telling you, it's sky's the limit. You'll solve a lot of problems. You'll create a lot of jobs. You'll increase the GDP. Okay, just like do your homework for your country. I'd rather die. I thought so. I thought that might be the case. Dying's easy. Math is hard.
Is that your exact point, Emil?
Look, bro, he hit the nail on the head. He said it in ways that he got us laughing. But at the end of the day, we have to look at our country with a couple of different very clear lenses. The first lens is that we didn't get here overnight. It took time for America to get to this point. And then he brought out all the different factors that influence why it's expensive to manufacture in America. But I'll say it this way. Nobody put a gun to American business owners' heads to move their jobs out of America. Somebody made it more attractive and more profitable and told business owners that profit is king. And I can name a couple of economists. One of them is a very famous Nobel-winning economist who said the shareholders' value is what matters. And as this country began to value shareholder value over things like, building a community and having a company as part of that community, it became easier and easier to offload those jobs overseas. I'll tell you that we have a bunch of problems that this comedian highlighted. And the fact is that when he said, it was funny, I'd rather die than do hard math. Well, yeah. It takes a lifetime to produce an engineer. You don't just make one. You have to put them in school for 8 years. And those 8 years are not college. That's from middle school forward. You're training an engineer so that they can get ready for undergraduate.
Ideally, you got them learning how to dribble in the 4th grade. Yes, you can have them take an additional math class, an additional class in the 4th grade, because what's happening is for African-American children specifically, quite often we may have a propensity for engineers. Somebody says you should be an engineer, and you realize, oh, you thought of this in the 10th grade, and your peer class has been taking STEM competitions since the 5th grade, since the 6th grade, just like you were on the basketball court or on the football iron. So when I say make it out NFL, you're absolutely right. Engineering is a lifetime. It can be done. There's more reward, it's more rewarding, and there's more opportunity. Leo, your thoughts on what you're hearing? Again, we want to just bring some light into this conversation. I wish I knew that comedian's name, but I thought it was pretty funny. But go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no. I think comedy is wonderful when it can disarm us from our defensiveness and just get us to see the reality of things, because the brother just put down something really real. And I love that he, as an Asian American, who sometimes people try to say they're the new black, or why can't they're the model minority, he's humbly saying, look, there's a lot of BS going on. And so for black people, you guys, I love you guys because, as a founder of Atlanta Classical Academy, where the smallest achievement gap between black and white exists in the whole city.
Nice.
Okay. A school that stresses.
Talk your stuff, brother. Talk your stuff. I love it.
A school that stresses mathematics, classical education, and rhetoric and critical thinking. That's what our school stresses. Okay. Culture is the biggest reason why we're able to decrease that gap, because we have not let black kids tending that school think that they can do everything that those rich buckhead white kids can do and do it better. And if we black people stop following the education system's desire to tell us to shut up and be satisfied with the low standards that we're letting you achieve by, we will be able to do exactly what you all do. Everything that we've achieved in sports, we can achieve in academics and intelligence. We can do it if people do what you brothers are saying.
No, I love it. I wanted to, if I could, steal a little glory here. I wrote a book a year ago called Re-Education of the Negro.
Tell it, brother. I love it. That's a dope tome.
You better let
That's
them
a
know.
dope tome.
So I'm just going to share a piece. Again, this is, in my opinion, just a way to put immigration in context. Again, it's not about being on the left or right of this thing. It's just a dialogue to make you think. So I'm going to share with you guys and get a quick thought, because I know Leo got to go right on time. So I want to make sure I get us out of here on time. So this piece is called Black Socrates Speaks: Immigration and the Invention of the White Race. They understand hate. Did you hear the story last week about the 11-year-old boy found dead in the desert after crossing the border, hoping to find a better life in America? I wonder if any 11-year-old boys died on the Mayflower when the Pilgrims crossed the Atlantic, hoping to find a better life here in America. I know I don't have all the answers on immigration, but people act like they would do something totally different if the shoe were on the other foot. What would you risk for a better life for your family? People have always fled death, desolation, and persecution. Again, historically, why did most Americans come here? Oops, I'm black. That's a different story. However, look up the history of the white race, and you will discover there was no white race before the transatlantic slave trade. Early in the English colonies, poor blacks and whites were often indentured servants, and on occasion they came together to rebel against the elite. The elite, in turn, created the white race to help quell rebellions by their indentured servants. By elevating one group over the other, poor whites and Africans stopped coming together to fight or kill the elites. And that, my friends, was the beginning of racism in this country. This situation at the border is history repeating itself all over again by creating an atmosphere of us versus them. Again, I don't know the answer, but I'm certain this is not it. I will not deny the financial burden this crisis may incur for the U.S., but for anyone who buys into illegal immigrants taking jobs and lower wages, think again. Please note that was the same rhetoric used by the so-called white race in the late 1800s when arguing against the abolition of slavery. Now ask yourself, what happened when the enslaved blacks were freed? Basically, they kept the same jobs they had before they were released from enslavement. Now fast forward to today and think, when's the last time you applied for the kind of jobs immigrant day workers line up for? I bet not too many Americans can make that claim, even those living below the poverty line. Sometimes through hard work and group economics, these day workers can elevate themselves above their situation, or if not, at least make a way for their children to have better lives. How can we hate that when that's as American as an apple pie? All I ask is that you think.
Yes, yes. Hear, hear.
100.
So it's just putting things in perspectives. Again, that's why we're politically conscious. Leo, any last thoughts in reference? Thank you for your time today. Again, we always like to have, Leo, Emil, I throw him on the left. And so, Leo, to a degree, you come from that conservative right perspective. So we try to have that balanced perspective. I think we've done that today. But any last thoughts on today's discussion before we let you get to your next obligation? But thank you for being with us.
I'm grateful that the political thought, the intellectual thought that you have had years ago is in a place where it can be properly incubated. All this disruption and this deconstruction presents an opportunity for Black people to really, not only innovate for ourselves, but for America to be better. I think that we're in a place with all this talk about what is the value of education and who controls it, for us to assert ourselves in a way that can really be powerful. And I'm all about it.
No, thank you for your time. Emil, I'll give you the last thought for episode 10, because like I said at the beginning, we are official now. You got to be 10 episodes in to be a podcast. If you actually go look up the context, a lot of podcasts don't make it past 6 that start out. So as much as people think the space is saturated, there's plenty of starts and stops. We still going, brother. So give us your last thought. Thank you for holding me down.
I appreciate it, man. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. And there were 7 children who died of the 102 original Mayflower passengers. Those 7 were between the ages of 7 and 14. And yes, they were trying to come to America to make a better life for themselves. They're trying to get away from what they consider persecution, their parents. So the parallel's obvious. It's obvious that people are coming to America because they perceive that this place has something better for them than what they're leaving. So the question we need to answer is, how do we welcome them in the way that allows America to prosper and for them to remain human? There's no reason why someone should come to America and not be treated fairly by the numbers. I don't care what skill they bring. If they come to this nation, they should be treated humanely. And what that means is we have to figure this thing out sooner rather than later. And the first way we should solve this problem is what Leo would say, is we got to elevate ourselves, especially as Black people in America. We got to elevate ourselves and be the people who lead the transformation. That transformation should be technological. It should be humane. It should be psychological and political. And that transformation happens by people who educate themselves, who do not fall for the propaganda, who are willing to read, do the hard work, and go to the dictionary and the encyclopedia and cut through the noise and understand that their stake in the game is bigger than the bag that they can create for themselves.
Hey, you sparked me. I'm going to close with one more piece. I'm being greedy. A shameless plug for Re-Education of the Negro. I just think it's appropriate based on what both of you said. This is actually the first piece in the book. Pick this up on Amazon, by the way, y'all. This piece is called Black Socrates Speaks, Black to the Future. After 400 years of this bullshit, it's time we lay down the foundation for the solutions we so desperately desire. Stop saying things are still the same, hoping to invoke a fix-it-now mentality, when the truth is we can only win if we play the long game. Understand today's game orients us to instant gratification, which means the discipline needed to set up the next generation is rendered non-existent. Some are so action-oriented that they never consider stepping back to reset our collective mindset first by properly putting our history into context. Therefore, taking action without knowing how far we've come or must go doesn't make much sense. Also, many scream our race is at war, when in actuality, we are currently involved in a Cold War requiring completely different tactics. Think of Haiti after their successful revolution in 1804. However, the Cold War tactics enacted by the French afterward severely handicapped their economic system in the long run. Haiti went from one of the wealthiest countries in the Western Hemisphere during the transatlantic enslavement trade to one of today's poorest countries. The truth is, the game is global now, and race as we understand it is becoming a thing of the distant past. Although as African Americans, we cannot ignore race, since this made-up social construct unfortunately still has real life or death consequences. However, culturally, with the hyper-focus on STEM, ownership, and healthy marriage before children, we can transcend most of the oppression that will leave the non-producers behind, regardless of race, in the new global economy. Remember, we can only act right if we think right. And so Just wanted to kind of leave it out. I think that fits dutifully
Home run.
to what both of you said, and it's a great way to close out episode 10. Y'all take care.
Take care, brothers.
All right. Peace, brothers.